Good evening, everyone. This is Dr. Rajesh Krishna, founder of Chest Council of India. Today happens to be the World COPD Day webinar under Chest Council of India, CCI. CCI has been conducting webinars non-stop from last 2.5 years, every week, and at times twice and thrice a week also. Today, on the occasion of World COPD Day webinar, we have an elite panel with us. We have stalwarts who do not need any introduction, who are here from every part of India. And today, I have a happy note to begin with. Morning around 11:30 a.m., even pre-webinar itself, we had 116 registrations for this webinar. So that is going to tell us that there will be a huge number of logins today. Now, to begin with, I would like to introduce here today's moderator, none other than the most stylish, with a powerful vocabulary, Dr. Rajesh Swarnakar from Nagpur. He's here. Welcome, Dr. Rajesh Swarnakar. And we have wonderful panelists. When the moderator is so much interesting to look at, then how should be the panel? We have Dr. KS Satish here from Bengaluru. Hello, sir. Warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
We have Dr. Rakesh Chawla here, who is from New Delhi. Hello. Welcome, sir. We have Dr. Nitin Abhyankar here from Pune. Welcome, Dr. Nitin Abhyankar.
Hello, sir.
Yeah. And we have two more people to join in, and they'll be shortly joining in. We have Dr. Amita Nene coming here. Arey, Amita?
Hi.
Naam bol diya aur
Hi. I'm on my way. I'll be joining in like 5 minutes properly. Hello.
It's okay.
Hi.
I'm introducing you. You take the introduction.
Thank you.
The moment I was introducing you, you arrived. Dr. Amita Nene, she has spice all over. So she came to know that I'm introducing her. So she jumped in and she's going out and she's joining in. So I welcome Dr. Amita Nene from Mumbai as a panelist for this fantastic webinar. And I think Dr. Surya sir should be joining by any time from now. So I welcome Dr. Surya sir from Lucknow in advance. So what do you have now? See, just look at this. Such a brilliant panel, a galaxy of stars. You see everyone who are over here. They have a legacy behind them. And COPD is perhaps the third most talked pulmonary illness next to tuberculosis and bronchial asthma in India and even everywhere in the world. COPD, of course, has its own guidelines, like the asthma has its guidelines, COPD has its guidelines. The World COPD Day is observed every year, and COPD has to be distinguished from bronchial asthma. Our elite panel is here. They are going to help you out in doing so. Once the presentations are over, the panel discussion begins. You are free to ask your questions in the chat box where the audience can post their questions. So best wishes, everyone. Greetings on the occasion of World COPD again. Long live Chest Council of India. Long live Indian Pulmonology. Long live India. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease is now one of the top 3 causes of death worldwide, and 90% of these deaths occur in low and middle income countries, that too under 70 years of age. More than 3.23 million people died of COPD in 2019 as per the report from World Health Organization, which accounts for 10% of all death globally. COPD represents an important public health problem, as we all know, which is both preventable and treatable. COPD is a major cause of chronic morbidity and mortality throughout the world, and many people suffer from this disease for years and die prematurely from it or its complications. Globally, the COPD burden is projected to increase in incoming decades because of continued exposure to COPD risk factors and aging of the population. In India, COPD is second most fatal disease after cardiac mortality and is increasingly being recognized as a preventable disease causing most morbidity, mortality and economic murder in this lower middle income countries like India. So hello dear audience, I am Dr. Rajesh Swarnakar, a pulmonologist from Nagpur and moderator for today's program, welcoming you in another edition of Thursday Chest Council of India webinar on eve of World COPD Day, which is being observed all over the world. Happy to inform that the webinar will be presided by our dear Dr. Krishna, to whom I fondly call Bhau, which means actually brother in Marathi. So the global initiative for chronic obstructive pulmonary disease or chronic obstructive lung disease program, or GOLD as it is called, was initiated in 1998. The goal was to produce recommendations for management of COPD based on diagnosis, management and prevention, and it is based on scientific information available to date. So the first report, which is Global Strategy for Diagnosis, Management and Prevention of COPD, was issued in 2001. In 2006 and again in 2011, a complete revision was prepared based on published research. These reports and their companion documents have been widely distributed and translated into many languages and can be found on the GOLD website. The GOLD Science Committee was established in 2002 to review published research on COPD management and prevention, to evaluate the impact of this research on recommendations in the GOLD documents related to management and prevention, and to post yearly updates on the GOLD website. Its members are recognized leaders in COPD research and clinical practice with the scientific credentials to contribute to the task of the committee and are invited to serve in a voluntary capacity. And it's glad to inform you that ex-stalwarts from India like Dr. Sandeep Sarvi and also Dr. Narasimham have been part of this committee. Updates of the 2011 revised report were released in January 2013, 14, 15, 16, and updates of the 2017 revised reports were made in 2018 till 2022. Now, just a couple of days back, we have the 2023 GOLD report which has come, and it is the fifth major revision of GOLD and actually incorporates an update to information that has been reviewed by the scientific committee from 2021 to 22, and a reassessment and revision of recommendation for the diagnosis, assessment and treatment of COPD. So the GOLD 2023 report is, as I said, major revision from the GOLD 2022 report, which follows basically systematic literature searches and double-blind review by the GOLD Science Committee. The GOLD report has been updated to include key peer-reviewed research publications from January 2021 to actually July 2022, and in fact, in total 387 new references have been added to the GOLD 2023 report. It is also realized that environmental factors other than tobacco smoking can contribute to COPD, and it has made the inroads in this report, and it has been recognized that it can start early in life and affect young individuals, and these are precursor conditions. So these are called as pre-COPD or express, which opens new windows of opportunity for its prevention, early diagnosis, and prompt and appropriate therapeutic interventions. These subjects actually have been labeled in this GOLD report as pre-COPD. The term PRIS, or which is called as preserved ratio impaired spirometry, has been proposed to identify those with normal ratio but abnormal spirometry, and subjects with pre-COPD or PRIS are at risk of developing airflow obstruction over time, but not all of them do. So actually research is needed to determine what is the best treatment for these individuals beyond smoking cessation. Excuse me. Now in this 2023 document, Gold also proposes a further evaluation of the ABCD combined assessment tool that recognizes the clinical relevance of exacerbation independently of the level of symptoms of the patient. So Gold 2023 now presents a new proposal. The A and B groups are unchanged, but C and D groups are now merged into a single group termed E to highlight the clinical relevance of exacerbations. So to know all these changes in details, we have the special edition of Chest Council of India's webinar on COPD. We will have basically stalwarts and star-studded panelists joining us from all over India. For example, Dr. KS Satish from Bangalore, Dr. Amita Nene from Mumbai, Dr. Rakesh Chawla from New Delhi, Dr. Surya Kant from Lucknow, Dr. Nitin Abhyankar from Pune. So in this webinar, we'll be able to understand the etiopathogenesis of COPD, its diagnostic modalities and updated treatment protocols. We will see what is the impact of air pollution on lung health. We'll see future role of interventional pulmonology procedures and current guidelines for, and also when to refer to thoracic surgeons for these interventions. And audience, we feel actually free to post your queries and get your doubts clarified from the national experts and star-studded panel that we have today. So we will start with a small talk by Dr. Nitin Abhyankar on diagnostic algorithm or modality in COPD, and then we will come back to the panel discussion, and we'll also take the audience question. Over to you, Dr. Nitin.
Hello, I am Dr. Nitin Abhyankar, and I am going to talk to you in a brief way about impulse oscillometry, which is a new, exciting clinical tool for obstructive airway disease. And this particular tool is a non-invasive procedure, can be performed within a few minutes. The purpose of the procedure is to measure the resistance of the small and the large airways, as well as the reactance of the airways. It is increasingly getting popularity, getting lung function, particularly in patients with asthma as well as COPD. In contrast to the spirometry, the test is typically performed measuring the measurement being done during tidal breathing. In other words, you don't have to forcefully exhale. Other advantages, which include evaluating COPD reversibility, and that is a new concept which I will briefly try and demonstrate. iOS is also a tool for chronic management of patients with asthma and COPD while on treatment. So it becomes a good follow-up tool also. Now look at the sound box here, which is sending those waves inside into the airway. These waves range from 5 Hertz to around 40 Hertz. But what matters to us is 5 Hertz and 20 Hertz. The 5 Hertz goes through the entire lung, and therefore, when it comes back, it is able to measure the total resistance. So the R5 equivalent to total resistance of the lung. R20 really gets limited to the larger airways, and it comes back from there. And therefore, it is representing the larger airways. So if I do R5 minus R20, then I start getting a perception of what is happening in the smaller airways or the peripheral airways. And that kind of obstruction is measurable. Now, AX is area under reactance is another important issue, and the reactance is redefined by the blue line. Your resistance is defined by the red line, and these are the two important lines when we are looking at impulse oscillometry or airway oscillometry. And this area, which is below the resonant frequency and up to R5, is calculated as AX or area under reactance. Now, what is the utility of this particular area? We will come to it even in the end, but just to revise this whole story, total resistance R5, R20 larger airway resistance, and R5 minus R20 is smaller airway resistance. So let me start discussing this with one paper which was very early in this 215 participants with all kind of gold stage severities. The iOS parameters showed worsening of R5 as well as AX or reactants depending on the severity of the COPD. So more severe the COPD, more worse was the R5. It was up to even 400% of the expected or predicted, and reactants also kept going up. There was a negative correlation with spirometry at baseline. This study recorded iOS at baseline and showed good relation with traditional pulmonary parameters. The conclusion was that iOS can be used as an alternative methodology for evaluating patients with COPD. It doesn't, of course, completely replace this. This is another paper in 2018 by Brian Lipworth and Jawal. And the review this is a review article, and what can we learn from COPD about COPD from impulse oscillometry was the question there. And the peripheral airway resistance is expressed as frequency-dependent heterogeneity between 5 Hz and 20 Hz. Once again, they talked about R5 minus R20, and they also talked about the peripheral airway compliance area under reactance curve. And both of these closely related to COPD severity and exacerbation. So higher the airway resistance and higher the amount of air trapping, or AX if you want to call that. So both R5 minus R20 and AX markedly improved in response to long-acting beta-2 agonists or bronchodilators. Now that was another interesting observation. AX appears to be a more sensitive than R5 minus R20 in response to bronchoconstriction. That means if you give bronchodilators, the AX seems to be changing more rapidly or more dramatically. And we will touch upon a few cases in the end towards this. So impulse oscillometry, this is another paper in 2012 by France. Impulse oscillometry may be of value in detecting early manifestations of COPD. And their conclusion was subjects who were reporting respiratory symptoms even when they did not meet the gold criteria. In these situations, iOS tended to better capture the changes in the respiratory mechanics than the COPDs. As forced oscillation measures are considered better to reflect distal airway function than the spirometry, and therefore iOS may be useful in early detection of COPD. That was the message. So that brings us to our first case. He was an ex-smoker, so expected to be a COPD. He had a dyspnea, but he also had episodic wheeze, and it was also worsening on exertion. And you can make out the concave curve on the spirometry. You also can make out that the FEV1 was 1.65 pre-bronchodilator, which was 55%, went up to 67%. This is 2.03. So he does meet criteria for a reversible obstruction, but also some amount of COPD. And now you look at AX, and AX is showing you dramatically that the pre-AX, which is area under reactance, which is reflecting the air trapping, 6.48, when it is post is just 2.66. R5 is 1.01 pre and 0.68 post. So it does decrease, but the AX is reducing by dramatically, nearly 3 times reduction is in the AX is in this particular case. So that's how you start looking at it. Now, once again, revising, the AX is the area under resistance, area under reactance, and that starts with the resonant frequency right up to X5, and that is on 5 Hz. So this particular area is reflected as the area under reactance, and that lung reactance reflects either the compliance of the lung or the amount of air trapping. In COPD setting, it reflects the amount of air trapping. In ILD, it will mean something different. Now, these are the criteria which are for reversibility testing, and these are yet not fully formulated, so I won't go to the depths of that, but there are criteria which have been described by the manufacturers. Now, this is another case. This is a long-standing asthma which has led to fixed airflow obstruction. I call it AOPD for the convenience. And once again, you can look that there is a serious airflow limitation. There is hardly any reversibility, and the FEV1 is as low as 0.89, and it's going up to 0.97, reflecting just 80 cc increase in FEV1 post bronchodilator. I will call it partial partial reversibility. There is a moderate restriction as well as moderate obstruction. Now look at what is shown on your on your impulse oscillometry, and the AX, which is 12.35 pre, is coming down to 0.74, as low as that, and that is a dramatic change. The R5 pre is 1.6, and the R5 post is 0.63. So that is another way of looking at it. And if you looked at the delta R5 minus R20, that is nearly 82% of it is occupied by the peripheral obstruction. Once again underlines that this is a COPD-like scenario, though this is a non-smoking COPD, but at the same time, it is working out in that particular fashion. And see the change in AX, which is quite dramatic. Very important criteria and worth remembering that an optimal test quality requires values on the coherence. That means between the 3 readings or 4 readings, whatever you're taking, there has to be 0.8 as 0.8 and 0.9 for 20 hertz and 0.8 for 5 hertz. So that is where the coherence lies. A good coherence, then only those tests get acceptable. This is the last case where he is once again a non-smoker with a fixed obstruction on spirometry. I would call it AOPD again, if you allow me to do that. Again, you can see that there is a concave out curve. You can appreciate that his FEV1 is just 1.51, which is 48%, and it's not moving much, 1.54, so hardly any reversibility. I call it on a spirometry as severe COPD. And then I look at the AX, which is 4.77, going down to 2.01. This is reversible, clearly reversible. This is coming down by 50%. R5 is coming down from nearly 0.83 to 0.63, so it's not so impressive. So AX reversibility seems to be more impressive, and the delta R5 by R20 is 76%, once again denoting that this is a severe peripheral disease. So the simple take homes are, it can be used in these patients very effectively. Number one, in COPD patients, it can be done as a tidal breathing, so the patient who is unable to perform also performs. A very elderly person on oxygen also can perform this test very comfortably without any issues. And last but not the least, look for the AX reversibility or area under reactance reversibility rather than the R5 reversibility or R5 minus R20 reversibility, which may or may not be seen to that extent. With that, I think I have concluded. And thank you very much for your patient listening.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Nitin, for a very lucid presentation of a very difficult topic that we are still busy comprehending. And I will come on this questions of this oscillometry, which use basically for us to diagnose COPD when we actually talk about it later in the program. But at this juncture, I will actually welcome all of our panelists, and I think we should start the show after these two brief talks that we had. And I'll go straight to Dr. Satish, in fact, and asking him, that we have got such a frequent change of our guidelines. For example, we basically actually follow gold guidelines, and we have got gold guidelines coming every about twice in a year, and now it has come just about 2 days back. So, what are your views on why these COPD guidelines need to be updated so much frequently? Because you also get confused. For example, I was telling you that now group, which was A, B, C, D, now it has been reduced to only 3 groups: A, B, and E. So, how do you really see this?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and nice to be on the webinar with all the stalwarts. Thanks, Krishna, and thanks others who have given me an opportunity, and thanks, Rajesh, for the nice introduction. Okay, so as we know, the Gold Committee or Gold Guidelines first started in 2002 or something, and there was a silence for quite few years because it was all asthma which was dominating and which was taking over. And as the science exploded and as the studies and RCTs were completed, I think we understood more about COPD than earlier times. And naturally, there was a lot of interest. And we also saw the the prevalence and the mortality and COPD was rising all over the world. And India ranks second in terms of mortality and also in terms of number of patients who have COPD. So just coming back to the point that these, you briefly mentioned about how the GOLD works, the committee work. These are very well known people in the area of GOLD research, in the COPD research in the GOLD committee. They are chosen few, and they meet formally, I think, twice a year, and in between they interact with each other, and then in the end they form a guideline. So in between they exchange their views, exchange the papers which are coming in regularly, especially the RCT studies. So it only shows why they are updating is that we are understanding better and better. The new concepts are being formed and new modalities of treatment are emerging. And that is why I think we are, in for changes very frequently, which is, in fact, I welcome, and I definitely don't mind changing the guidelines and applying to the patient's care, simply because the impact on this can be huge on our patient care. That is why I think there was update 2015, 2016. I think this is the fifth one, a major revision of the COPD guidelines, the GOLD guidelines, the fifth one. So it's all done very well, and then the grade A, B, C, D, and then the RCTs were clubbed together, and then they form the guidelines. It only shows that there is an explosion of knowledge and understanding of COPD at present, which will definitely make the life simpler for treating clinicians and also for our patients. Thanks.
Yes, it's true, Dr. Satish. In fact, that basically we do have this GOLD guidelines which come so frequently. Otherwise, we see that guidelines which have been made by various actually ERS societies or others, they take actually years time to get updated. So basically they just become dated. In fact, it takes 2, 3, 4 years time before they really come, I think, with the new updated guidelines. But GOLD is doing its job very nicely. In fact, we also saw the guidelines updated also during the COVID times when we actually needed its also guidance. So I think that is actually what is actually needed for us. And I think we should start from the beginning, in fact. And now I'll go to Dr. Chawla and ask him about.
Can I just make a comment? Because I was interacting with Dr. Atul Mehta recently, and he had a very, very beautiful suggestion, because the whole world is now connected, social media, WhatsApp, all kind of modalities. So why not have a 3-monthly update, which is like, you can keep reviewing all your articles, and just, rather than having a sea change after 3 years and all of a sudden group A, B, C, D are now replaced by A, B, E. I think it would make much better sense that if that transition was gradual, more data emerging, saying that the C, because we kept saying that the group CD really doesn't exist in the true sense of it. And now they have agreed in the sense. So the clinicians sense it much earlier as compared to the researchers, because researchers need hardcore evidence, and it takes time for the research to really evolve. Whereas clinicals are seeing it in a day-to-day level. So I think over a period of time, I think that kind of a 3-monthly update and an online update, rather than just saying that I'm changing the guidelines.
The whole thing is changed. Yeah. True. So I think I would come to Dr. Chawla, and as I said, I will start from the beginning. So I think there are a lot of changes in definition and also etiology pathogenesis. For example, now they got terms like earlier COPD, pre, and then also pre also COPD, and then also COPD in young. So I'd like to ask Dr. Chawla to just clarify this, because there are a lot of changes here.
Thank you, Rajesh, and thank you, Krishna Bhai, for inviting and being part of this prestigious panel. I still not able to understand, after 3 years, the sudden change and suggestion by another stalwart every 3 months, Indian COPD guidelines still to be updated, which to follow, and who is to make, how these guidelines should be made, who represents these guidelines. The whole world is forced to follow. Suddenly, all pharma companies will start putting on you, there is a change, sir, there is a group, these are the changes, and this is this is what you have to take. Well, unimaginable things are happening, made sitting in an air-conditioned room of the Europe by few people who are guiding the whole world. So it has to be the consensus guidelines where there should be an equal representation of the world rather than only of the Europe, which wants the whole world to follow them. Well, coming to this is my personal opinion. I may be wrong, but coming to your question, how you define now the COPD, it is as you said in your talk, it is top 3 causes of the death today. It is preventable and treatable. And you see, in Indian scenario, it is totally ignored. The smoker with the smoker's cough will continue, carry on, will not see the doctor, even if he has got an early COPD. It is a heterogeneous, not fully reversible airflow limitation, characterized by the patient will present to you with breathlessness, progressive breathlessness, cough, sputum production, and which is because of the abnormality in the airways and alveoli. The term has come is the getomics, which is gene-environment interaction over a time, which damages your lungs. And most relevant is now in this 2023, that SERPINA1 gene, which leads to alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency, has been isolated and has been labeled. And patients, as you said, with normal FEV1, but with the normal ratio, but abnormal spirometry are pre-COPD, and PRISM is reserved ratio impaired spirometry. So these are the new terms which have been introduced to the pulmonologist. This is how he has to take. But still, I think old is a gold. It is an obstructive airway disease, which is partially reversible or irreversible. You correlate it with the history of the risk factors like smoking. Very important. Because if you walk into any casualty of any hospital, any GP, see, what I see is, rather than following these guidelines, you need to make your GPs, your internal medicine fellows to be aware of COPD, what exactly is the COPD. So the history is very important. When you correlate, people do not know still how to read a spirometry. So patient having dyspnea, cough with history of smoking, or the history of biomass exposure, or the occupations like organic and inorganic dust exposure, or like a city like Delhi, which is the most polluted city, having pollutants like ozone, oxides of nitrogen or sulfur, and heavy metals in the air, which is like a death chamber, or you call it toxic chamber. And that genetic history is very important if you are able to find out the gene mutations. So the history with the symptoms is very, very important before you. And you walk into casualty, any patient with cough, expectoration, breathlessness, COPD. Cough, expectoration, breathlessness, COPD. Nobody is ready to take the history, whether it is asthma, it's acute allergic bronchitis, it is tropical pulmonary eosinophilia, or it is COPD. So even history helps you to find out. Thank you.
Yeah, so for Dr. Chawla, you have just said that air also pollution is also one of the factors which has been recognized by this. And at this juncture, I also welcome Dr. Kant, who has also joined us. And now for the first time in a gold with COPD, Dr. Kant, we have got some also contribution that about 50% of COPD can also be caused by biomass fuel. So therefore that is anonymous smoker COPD. What you got to say about this, basically, because we were struggling to get this into, and now we have got also the research papers which says that at least about 50% of COPD can be actually caused by non-smoker COPD.
Yes. Am I audible, Dr. Swarnakar?
Yeah. You are, sir.
Okay. So thank you, Dr. Rajesh, for moderating this session, and a wonderful opportunity given by Chess Council of India, especially our dear younger friend, Dr. Krishna. You see, I agree, 100% agree with Dr. Rakesh Chawla. First thing, before coming to answer of your question, but I think the guidelines which are coming, of course, yearly just before the World COPD Day, updated by the Gold Guidelines Committee, of course, they should be very simple, very precise, and they should be disseminated. Guidelines should not be meant for keeping in the shelf, bookshelf, or almirah, or in your inbox. The second thing is that yes, there should be more representation of the developing country, as COPD is more prevalent in the developing world. For example, if you see the India, around 57.6 million cases of COPD are here. So roughly they comes around to 6 crore. Now 6 crore of COPD cases cannot be treated by or managed by a few thousand pulmonologists or few hundreds of pulmonologists who go through the guidelines immediately. So I think we have to correct even the general physicians and all MD medicine people also and practitioners also to make the precise Indian guidelines so that they can be disseminated for the benefit of the society. This is number one. Now coming to the answer, yes, India took a lead for establishing an entity of non-smoker COPD. I still remember 20 years back, the COPD was meaning that person is smoking and that's why developing COPD. This was the concept developed by the Western world. It is the developing country, it is the rather India, when Dr. Sandeep Salvi and Dr. S.K. Jindal and so many other people. We also did a small study on non-smoker COPD in the Department of Respiratory Medicine at King George's Medical University, to which I belong. And then, of course, there was a change in the problem is that we do publish less, and that's why we have less impact on the gold, because they consider only the publication. They don't take the feedback of your experience-based practice. So I think now there is a well-known entity called non-smoker COPD, and this non-smoker COPD is relatively different physiologically, pathologically, radiologically, and it's also important to manage. And that's why these two phenotypes, basic two phenotypes, the smoker COPD and non-smoker COPD, now the time has come that we should recognize the smoker COPD as well as non-smoker COPD. Non-smoker COPD, as Dr. Rajesh, you have already mentioned, that the major factor is in the females, where is still a lot of people, there are a lot of families, especially in rural India, they are still practicing the cooking fuel on the chula with the cow dung and the wood. And thanks to our Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji for the Ujjwala Yojana, for 6 years back, this Ujjwala Yojana was launched. And till date, 9 crore families has been given option of clean fuel, that is LPG. So I think in later years, we will see less incidence of non-smoker COPD, especially in females, especially in rural India. But however, air pollution, as Dr. Rajesh Chawla had mentioned, it's a rampant cause for the air pollution, not only the ambient air pollution, outdoor air pollution, or indoor air pollution also, because our houses now, they are increasing with the so many things, a lot of curtains, a lot of carpets, and that's why we are giving opportunity for the dust to settle down on these. And a lot of other things. We are using the mosquito repellent coils and so many other things. I mean, continuously we are creating a lot of noxious particles and gases inside the houses also. That's also very challenging issue. So non-smoker COPD, and thus I welcome this new thing, that the introduction of impulse oscillometer. Dr. Nitin has given a wonderful lecture on that, very short, very precise. Congratulations, Dr. Nitin. And I think the impulse oscillometer is the right investigation. It is not the spirometry which is the right investigation for diagnosing or follow-up of the COPD. Why I'm saying? Because the majority of COPD which we pulmonologists see is the severe COPD or very severe COPD, where most of them, they cannot perform spirometry, number one. Secondly, the elderly people also, usually patients are, although the gold guidelines had included this time, this changing young age COPD. In India, we used to see 30 plus COPD, while it was still the 40 plus. Now they are considered, yes, COPD is also coming in younger patient. So this younger COPD, the elderly, if you see, they are also not normally, they cannot perform spirometry. So I think impulse oscillometer, because of so many regions, number one, that it is being done on tidal volume, it does not require the forceful maneuver, number one. Number two, it can detect the early COPD also. Not to talk of only early COPD, the concept of early COPD and pre-COPD has come into the 2023 guidelines of COPD by Gold. It can also detect the altered lung function or starting of deterioration of lung function in the smoker, so that we can use this tool for the advocacy of smoking cessation also. And third thing, for the follow-up also, where we see that spirometry does not show significant reversibility or significant data in terms of bronchodilator FEV1, while in terms of assessment of impulse oscillometer, there is, of course, clear-cut evidence. You can monitor, you can show, you can document, you can show that the patient that yes, your lung functions are improving now. So it's a better tool for not only early diagnosis, for predictor of the COPD in smokers, for the monitoring of COPD. But so I'm happy that UP, the first impulse oscillometer of Uttar Pradesh, is with us since last 3-4 years in the Department of Respiratory Medicine at KGMU, and our resident and facility, the community is, of course, by large is getting the benefit of it. So thank you, Dr. Rajesh, for putting a very important question of this non-smoker COPD.
Yes, and as you said that, and these oscillometers have also now become very, very portable. So initially we used to have bulky instruments, and now they are quite portable and are easily doable. So apart from this non-smoker COPD, we've got another problem in India, that is of about TB, which is not talked about basically, and we've got a lot of post-TB COPD. So I think Dr. Amita would be the right person to address this question with the vast experience in TB. Would you share your opinion on this relationship of TB and COPD, which is quite unique to our country? In fact, it's not talked about anywhere else. I think you're on mute, Amita.
Sorry. Thank you so much, dear Rajesh, for this very important and clinically relevant question. And I'm very, very happy to be a part of this esteemed panel. And Dr. Krishna, as always, comes up with the best webinar idea. So thank you, Dr. Krishna, for involving me here. So the thing is that, in our country, the association between TB and COPD is just so common, and it is so increasingly being seen that we actually prefer to use the term TOPD, which is TB associated obstructive pulmonary disease. So the thing is that we have a term known as TOPD, which tells you about development of COPD in a patient who has past history of TB. So the thing is, it's very, very important and interesting that patients who have past history of TB, they also develop obstructive airway disease. They need not be smokers. They need not have any kind of exposure to biomass exposure. They need not have any kind of exposure to any kind of factors which are known to cause COPD, but just past history of TB will give rise to COPD in them. It is a little unfortunate because the TB-related COPD, the TOPD, is seen in younger patients. We know that COPD patients are usually more than 40 years of age, but the TOPD patients are less than 40 years of age. Males and females are equally affected because anybody can get TB, unlike COPD where males are more commonly involved. Also, it has been seen that breathlessness is worse. It is less reversible, and at the same time, chances of sputum production are more and chances of hemoptysis are more in patients of TOPD as compared to a patient of COPD. And the thing is that if these people are smokers or if they have biomass exposure, which actually would be, then these patients' prognosis is much, much worse than a normal COPD patient. So TB basically turns out to be a predictor who not only causes COPD, but also affects your outcome, your mortality, your prognosis, etc. And it has been found that when the spirometry is done, then the obstruction is usually irreversible. Yes, and because of that, we prefer not to give steroids upfront. We prefer to give them inhaled LAMA combination. And if patients don't do well, only then we prefer to add steroids and inhaled steroids. And it is said that inhaled steroids should be not added at least in first 2 years because they are a little worried about a TB relapse happening in these people, though I have not really seen it in my practice. So I want to say that TOPD is actually a term which really exists. So when you're a patient of TB, complaints of breathlessness, you basically want to just say, oh, it's because of all the sequelae, all the fibrotic changes that you're seeing on the X-ray. You often say that PFT doesn't show any reversibility, but please do try inhalers for the patient. Bronchodilator, dual bronchodilators would be the best, and they often improve. Thank you.
And while you're at it, Amita, there is also a relationship of asthma and COPD. So the term echo is now not a preferred infection. Now they call asthma or COPD overlap or something. So what is your views on that? Is asthma and COPD, if suppose patient is basically steroid naive and he's not taken actually steroids, and how then will he just behave like a COPD after some years of time?
Again, a very interesting question. So we know that Gina believes in ACOS, whereas Gold doesn't believe. I personally definitely believe in ACOS. So basically, we know asthma, COPD overlap syndrome. So as per Gold, they say that basically asthma is different, COPD is different. Sometimes people may have similar comorbidities for each, and therefore they develop, but they want to say it's asthma with COPD. So what I want to basically tell you is that it is very, very important when we see a smoker, we still have to find history of atopy. We still have to ask about allergic rhinitis, urticaria, allergic problems in the eyes, about cough variant asthma. We have to ask about history of asthma in the family, because it is very, very common that asthma and COPD can coexist. And it is very, very important that if asthma and COPD coexist, you treat them as asthma and not as COPD. And therefore, ICS become extremely important. They become first-line treatment for these people. Unlike COPD, where we introduce inhale corticosteroids much later, only if it's between severe or very severe obstruction, or if it is, eosinophils are more than 300 for sure, or the gray zone of 100 to 300. But the important part is that these people have worse PFT, asthma with COPD, they have more chance of exacerbations, and they also have a worse outcome. So it's very, very important to diagnose the dual condition, because by adding ICS to these people, you can actually dramatically change their lives and even prognosis.
Yes, Amita. So that was the point, in fact, that in these cases we have to use also LABA along with ICS, and also especially if suppose eosinophil counts are more than 200, which has been given by Gold also, in fact. I would now turn to your diagnosis, and I would come to Dr. Nitin, who has elucidated about also oscillometry. Unfortunately, oscillometry doesn't find its actual mention even in Gold also 2023, although we have got a lot of papers. In fact, we have papers in the New York England Journal, in fact, about early COPD. While we are focusing on this early COPD, we don't seem to agree that spirometry can actually detect all this. What are your views on this, that still there is no oscillometry's place basically in this Gold guideline? And then how much is a limitation of actually spirometry that is the gold standard as of now in also diagnosing as well as monitoring COPD patients?
I think very good question, and fairly simple clinical answers to that. I think, Rajesh, you, me, know, everybody in this panel, that clinicians understand the stories much earlier than the researchers do. Because the researcher have the job of documenting evidence, and evidence is hard to come by. So I think the essential story is that if today we are so excited about impulse oscillometry, Dr. Suryakant, 4 years he's using it. I am using it for just about a year. So I think he will, and Rajesh, you are using it for nearly 4 years again. So I think all of us have that knowledge that look clearly, there is no doubt that the so-called prisms and so-called pre-COPD is very much picked up by impulse oscillometry earlier. The so-called non-reversibility is defined by the impulse oscillometry earlier. But the guidelines have to be guidelines because they are determined by the researchers and the evidence. And these two put together, I think it's going to be 3 years, and you will have to wait for those 3 years. And that's why that update every 3 months is possibly important. Because every research paper which comes in the way, which will take us a little more towards the reality. Because realistically, if you really ask me today, what am I doing? Even in my asthma patients, forget about the COPD patients, even in my asthma patients with a normal spirometry, if I see enough reversibility on the impulse oscillometry, I am labeling it as asthma without much hesitance. And in any case, you have the clinical license of using them either ways. So finally, what is asthma according to you is asthma, what is COPD according to you is COPD. So then you are getting tangled with the terms like pre-COPD, prism. There is no end to that because the research is still not there. And I think that's the research will take its own sweet time to reach there. So it's all right. I'm not against that. Let the research be consolidated over a period of time. But every new paper which is coming in, why not it is updated to everybody on routine basis, and then people will make educated, intelligent decisions rather than following guidelines as if they are some gospel truth.
True, and as you know that if you go to severe COPD patients and if you ask him to do a forced expiratory maneuver in PFT, it's quite difficult to him.
So difficult, so challenging, challenging.
So some of the patients actually refuse that. Ki sir, wola test nahi karenge because it actually brings them to more, I think, trouble. So oscillometry, as you all have.
Rajesh, may I add one more point? I mentioned about the oxygen patients. Most of our patients with COPD exacerbation who are even ICU admissions, by the time they are discharged, we at least perform an impulse oscillometry with a reversibility. And that's a useful tool. Of course, once in a while, you will have some kind of a volume overload, which will also look like obstruction, and you will have a confounding factors, agreed. But at the same time, some kind of a bronchodilator reversibility can be documented even in these patients who are on oxygen. And they can comfortably do it as long as they are taken there on a wheelchair and in a comfortable state.
Yes. And Dr. Chawla wants to come in. Yeah, Dr. Chawla.
See, Nitin, I agree. Now you see retrospectively. You are practicing impulse oscillometry. You are comparing it with spirometry. You are feeling it's comfortable. Someone for 4 years, someone for 1 year. It is a new kid on the block. People are experimenting it. But why? Why the Europe? Why the West is not accepting it, that it is an important tool for COPD or for asthma? Still, spirometry remains the gold standard. So we need to discuss that also. Your experience may be very nice. Patient doesn't have to put the efforts. He just have to blow in and blow out at the tidal volume. Everything is all right. If it is so impressive, so good, why sitting, as I told you, sitting in a room making these guidelines? What are the impulses which are forcing them to include these things and not to include these things in the guidelines? So you have to have a universal presentation before we opt for these guidelines. Because there is no, as Surya has said, we don't produce data, we don't have registry. Yeah. We don't have enough staff with us who will pitch in to give this. The whole pharma industry can support to generate this data, but they are more busy with other data rather than the important data which can promote our country.
Yeah, so truly we actually need to collate our data, in fact, and all these sectors, and we need to come out and already I think I'm quite sure that within 1 or 2 years, I think gold I think will have oscillometry included, at least for early I think COPD detection. I also ask you one more question.
Sandeep and Narsivan can make a big impact there. It's already there. They are already making the impact there, isn't it?
Yeah, true. So it is their recommendation, and also I think some of the research papers that would be, I think, considered for this. Is there any also scoring system to the now select patients? For example, we got a classification which has been also defined. Dr. Nitin, we got A, B, C, D qualified. I'm not this thing now. We got A, B, and E. If you can elaborate on that changes which has happened in this 2023 gold update, which has just come a couple of days. In fact, I also got to read only in about 2 days, but then I could see that C and D has been clubbed to E.
Correct. And it's a very, very practically relevant question, because somebody, whatever the symptomatology he has at baseline, because he may be a poor perceiver or he may be a very symptomatic patient. So the C and D is differentiated only on the basis of symptoms. Exacerbations are the same in both the groups. So if it is somebody who is repeatedly coming into the hospital, going through a lot of expenses, has a clear risk to life, I think they should be in the same group, whether they are symptomatic at baseline or not. So or simple exertional dyspnea, if they don't exhibit, but they are repeatedly landing in the hospital, they should be in the same group, because the risk to life, the expenditure, and the overall morbidity that they have to go through is nearly the same. So I absolutely agree that it was relevant, because every time we discuss groups A, B, C, D, I used to say C
and D
there, but I think I see B and D. I don't see A because A belongs to the general practitioners,
General
and
practitioners.
C, it seems to be an oxymoron. I mean, it's an utopian world where only exacerbating and never having symptoms. So now I think yes. I mean, if you really see that, maybe 1 or 2% of the people, but they should belong to Group D in the terms of management principles. I don't think that should change at all.
Yeah. And Dr. Satish, does it also change the treatment now that these two groups are clubbed? And they say that in COPD you should not actually use LABA and ICS, but then you should add ICS only to what you call LABA-LAMA treatment. So I mean, when you are just grouping this actually CD into that E group, does it also change your treatment plan, which was there till now?
Absolutely. I mean, Nitin was bang on when he said that C and D belongs to all of us, pulmonologists and Group A. And he's right in the sense we were not able to really make a difference between C and D. They were almost same, moderate exacerbation, more than 2, and one or more requiring hospitalization. And the treatment was almost same, except that, there was not sure about the inhaled steroids. And now clubbing together, making it E, makes it easy for us that this is a group which has highest mortality. No doubt about it. And they are very symptomatic and they consume, a lot of the healthcare system costs and things like that. And for their own personal care, they definitely needs to be in one group, the C and D, which makes it easy. And definitely this will help us. And as the new guideline says, there is no role for LABA and ICS. And I agree with that because they have shown with, I think, 2 RCTs, the ethos and another one, showing that this has shown mortality benefit. So exacerbation causing mortality prevented by using LABA-LAMA ICS rather than LABA and ICS. So we are very sure many patients we were talking about asthma and COPD, we were giving ICS and LABA saying that, it may work for both. But now we know whenever we start LABA, think about starting an inhaled corticosteroid in COPD patient, we have to think about the triple combination and not dual combination. Makes sense, I feel, with the data that's available and the RCTs are available. Thanks.
And also one more moot point is that whether you would actually add ICS only if you find eosinophils more than 100, 200 in these patients, or in this E group, which are exacerbators, you would actually use LABA-LAMA ICS in all the patients, because in earlier COPD they had indicated that you can use ICS only when these eosinophils are more than 100 or more than 200. Definitely you have to use ICS. But now this E group has got patients who are exacerbators. So yeah. I mean, how would you apply those guidelines still, or that you would just straight away add actually ICS to LABA-LAMA in these patients?
I mean, if they are exacerbating, like what they mentioned, one of the main criteria is clinical criteria, which is 2 moderate exacerbation or 1 requiring hospitalization. That's definitely on. And then the second one, I think, is more than 300 eosinophil count. And consider if it is more than 100 or I think 150 to use inhaled corticosteroids. If less than 100, even if they are exacerbating, I think the inhaled corticosteroids may do more harm than good. And of course, the other contraindication is if they have recurrent pneumonias and other contraindications for inhaled corticosteroids, like probably a past history of tuberculosis. Just think about it before you really give them inhaled corticosteroids, which Amita was mentioning about TOPD. So definitely these criteria should be used and individualize the treatment rather than just going by the guidelines. The guidelines are there to help us to guide uniformly treating all patients. But in an individual patient, you can always mention that, yes, here is a patient who is responding. Here is a patient who is getting admitted frequently. That's why I would give this treatment, even though the eosinophil count is not more than 300.
And also, Amita, for our young audience, if you can summarize groups A, B, and E, and then what would be your preferred choices in, just terms of pharmacotherapy that we use in these patients now? So as we said, A of course, what called patient doesn't come to us, right? So A, now we got A, B, and E. What?
Rajesh, I've just got one important call from the ICU. I'll just join
Okay.
back. Can somebody just? I'll come in 2 minutes. So can somebody?
Yeah.
Or I'll answer after I come back.
No. So I will.
I'll just come
I will
back.
shift this patient to, I will shift this actually. This is question Dr. Nitin Abhyankar. So now what would be a preferred pharmacotherapy now that we are discussing pharmacotherapy of COPD? What are the treatment options that you have now got for these individual groups which has come into existence in this gold?
Yeah, I think, for group A, which I think remains with the general practitioners, a SAMA, kind of combination or a singlet of also maybe enough intermittent use. But I think the group A is intermittent symptoms. Group B is person who is typically symptomatic on exertion and increasingly exercise limited. In that case situation, LAMA may be a little ahead because it is known to document prevention of exacerbations, but LAMA or LAVA can come in first, and LAVA-LAMA combination is possibly the best combination for group P. When you enter the group E, essentially, on most of the situations, you will be using inhaled corticosteroids in addition, so it's a triplet, but there are few honorable exceptions to that. One, as which Amita already said, COPD, where you are really wondering whether this person will get back or tuberculosis. The other one, I will say, if there is a coexistent bronchiectasis in a big way and a bad colonization of bacteria, and I'm not 100% sure whether ICS is helping. The third exception to that rule will be truly eosinopenic patients, somebody who just has no eosinophils in the bloodstream, or less than 100. That would be a typical scenario. I would be a little wary to add ICS unless until you are sure that the exacerbations are caused not by infections and otherwise. And of course, I'll be again wary about patients who have recurrent bacterial pneumonias. So these four exceptions, if I keep in mind, then most of the rest of the world which belongs to the group E can get a triplet. So I think that's how that. And those choices are fairly open. I think there'll be an 19 bis in most of them. Say, for example, I will prefer cyclosinide over, say fluticasone and fluticasone over, budesonide over fluticasone temporarily. But then again, the dose of fluticasone and furet salt comes into the play. That might be better. Mometasone may be a little better. So I think there you can discuss the nitty-gritty. The umeclonidum versus glycopyrronium, again, you can discuss the nitty-gritty. But I think those are 19 bis kind of choices. They are not like going to make a profound difference. So I think a LAVA, a LAMA, and an ICS would be a good choice for most of the group E, except the exacerbations I mentioned. You could add one or two into that exceptions group.
Yeah, and I think it depends also whether they're just predominant emphysema patients or predominant chronic bronchitis kind of patients who have a lot of sputum, also production. So I would bring in Dr. Suryakant again here, because what is basically beyond these drugs and also pharmacotherapy, because and each and every patient does ask us, sir, ye jo hai, yoga ka kya role hai? And no, they're all followers of our babas and this thing who do Kapal Bharti and Bhastrika and all those exercises. So what would be the safer kind of exercise for these patients who got emphysema, who got bulla, and still they can also benefit from yoga?
You see, now for last 3 decades, there is an attraction for going to the gym and making the biceps and triceps like Salman Khan and Akshay Kumar. Now, our ancestors, they were not going to the gym, rather gyms were not available. They were more focusing on improving or enhancing the respiratory muscle tone. So this is the difference, that our ancestors were more interested in increasing respiratory muscle tone, and youngsters now are more interested in making more abs, more biceps, more triceps like this. So that is the difference. Ultimately, when you are ill, severely ill, and in last 3 years during the COVID times, now the public has become very aware about the ventilators, the power of the ventilatory muscles. Ultimately, doctors say, you see, your patient is in ventilatory fatigue. Ventilating muscles are not cooperating, not working. So patient is not able to breathe spontaneously. Now we have to breathe this patient from outside through the help of ventilators. So I think ancestors were very clever. They used to enhance the muscle power or muscle tone of the all respiratory muscles, including the diaphragm, including the accessory muscles of all respiration. And that's why they have more stamina, I would say more lung stamina. And that's why even despite that, there is a biomass fuel exposure, even that they were taking, hookah, BD, say, smoking and all other factors, although air pollution was not a contributory factor at that time, but they developed less COPD in comparison to the modern era, where now we are facing that even in youngsters, even Gold has accepted in 2023 that youngsters now developing COPD. So now coming to what is the physiology, what is the mechanics behind the improving the lung stamina by yoga and pranayama? You see, what is the problem in COPD? The problem in COPD is that patient is not able to squeeze out the retained air. That is the main problem. And how this yoga and pranayama help, because it corrects your breathing techniques, it tries to empty your lung, even the smaller airways, even the major airways, so that there should be less and less retention of air. So first thing, the certain postures which are called yoga, these postures are basically meant in which we, of course, advise to practice the yoga for COPD or asthma patient. That is, in such yoga, there is a more and more flexion of the body, more and more deep exhalation during the yoga practices and posture. For example, one asana is called Paschimottanasana, where you try to, touch your forehead to your feet. So this is the completely exercise. And of course, you have to exhale the whole air. So that is how you are decreasing the retention of air. So that is one, the yoga and pranayama help. The second is basically that they are improving the tone of the all respiratory muscles. So respiratory muscles, they get strengthened, and that's why they are working more efficiently in such chronic respiratory patient, not only COPD, but all chronic respiratory patient. The third thing is, when you do like Bhastika pranayam or Kapalbhati pranayam, where there is a forceful exhalation. Now, what happens during the forceful exhalation? That during forceful exhalation, all the retained mucus comes out. So this helps in clearing of the retention of mucus. I used to say that such type of pranayam, which includes the forceful exhalation, they are like vacuum cleaner. When we use our vacuum cleaner in our drying room, our car, and so many accessories where they take out the dust and all kind of fumes or all kind of dust, I would say, from the other parts and accessories and our sofa and all that. So such kind of pranayam, which use the forceful exhalation, they basically help in the taking out of the all mucus or secretions. So they are also helping. I think a lot of ways by which the yoga is helping. We have 16 publications how yoga and pranayam are helping in various respiratory diseases. Even Dr. Guleria has very good presentation on how yoga and pranayam helping in COPD. And now even Western literature is full of how this yoga pranayam is helping the chronic respiratory patient and especially COPD.
And I think that
Surya sir, I will add Shankhanar. I will add Shankhanar.
Yes.
In Varanasi, the more you see 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, again, it's a forceful exhalation.
Yes, it helps on force. Wonderful, sir, Shankhanar.
Yeah, so I think it is. So I think it is akin to pursed lip breathing, right? Yeah. So because when you put the shank, basically you have a pursed lip and then you have to blow. So I think that is already known that this is really, good. Another question is basically when we're just managing these COPD patients is basically what I call smoking cessation. And I think we at the pulmonologists have got a role of in that which we offer neglect. We would just write take a prescription, and then we don't have much of what I call smoking cessation clinics. Dr. Satish, do you have any of these suggestions? In fact, how then we should go about it? Whether we should have some counselors in our clinic who would actually see that there's some effective smoking cessation program in our for our COPD patients.
I mean, definitely, it's ideal to have somebody who can take the burden out of us. And many a time we spend very few minutes saying, you do physiotherapy, you do exercises, you do pranayam, and then it's not structured. So if it becomes more structured and more focused, then the outcome definitely is going to be good. That's one of the non-pharmacological treatment mentioned, the rehabilitation, which can reduce the mortality and morbidity of patients with severe COPD. So if you have ideally somebody sitting there and helping patients, that's going to make definitely a difference. But how many of us can afford to have these people who are trained and who are going to sit in our clinic and do it? Maybe referral sometimes is good, or also the coming back to not just a simple one, the proper scientific pulmonary rehabilitation even at home, because many patients cannot travel and many of them may be on oxygen and many of them may not have help to go to the hospital every other day for a few weeks. So the home pulmonary rehabilitation also makes a difference. Yes, ideal situation. If you have somebody who can do, great.
Rajesh, can I add something here?
Yeah, Nitin.
I think, because I absolutely agree with Dr. Satish, but one thing which I think must be remembered, that 3-minute counseling by a trained physician goes a long way. And I call it, I have started recently calling it hard counseling rather than the so-called soft counseling. Sir, please kariye. Sir, please smoking chhodiye. No, you have to hard counsel these guys, and they are die-hard people. They will tell you, "Haan, sir, karta hu, kam karta hu. I'll reduce it to 2.
What do you
I'll
say
reduce it to half a pack." That doesn't work. So unless until you threaten that you will disown them and hard counsel them, it will not work. So I think those 3 minutes are well spent if you spend that time with them. Of course, the counseling in addition will help, and he'll be the soft counselor. But a doctor getting angry with the patient about smoking, and it's worth it. Some people will call you rude on the internet. That's okay. I am ready to take the blame on that, but I will hard counsel most of my smoking patients, definitely.
And especially if there are also spouses present, and if you counsel it, then
yes.
And in fact, that is very effective.
If you see after a year or after 2 years, most people whom you have had a bad hard counseling session, they come around as long as they are with you. They may be with somebody else. If he is smarter than you, that's okay. I don't mind that. But I think if they are back with you, they actually are grateful to you for that hard counseling session that you did once.
Swamita, I'll just come back to you on pulmonary rehabilitation. So basically how, when, and now, even this gold COPD 2023, they also tell about tele rehabilitation, in fact. So there is no need for such patients to be brought to hospital, and you can have online sessions. How important are they, Amita?
Yeah, I basically feel that pulmonary rehabilitation is really an ignored part of COPD, which can actually make a dramatic difference to their life. Because of physiotherapy, you can do more work with the same limited lung function. And therefore, it's very, very important that we teach them correct kind of breathing. Two most important being diaphragmatic breathing, which we can also show them, and the other one being pursed lip breathing, which they all are doing, but they are not aware. So we just tell them they are supposed to do it. So the thing is, however busy my practice is, every time a COPD comes in, and before he goes in, 2 questions are asked. What about your smoking? And we don't trust the patient. We ask the spouse. I didn't say wife and I said spouse, because these days we're getting more and more female smoker COPDs. That's number one. And the second thing is about the pulmonary rehab. We always ask them. We actually also give them contacts of people, and we basically tell the patient that your physiotherapist is going to report to us. So we know whether you're doing it or not. With COVID, something really very good happened was that our physiotherapists have now gone on net. So the thing is that the patient is not supposed to go to them. They have online sessions which are fantastic. And the patients are so very happy doing it, So I kind of feel that's very important. And so one other important thing is that in addition to pursed lip breathing and diaphragmatic breathing, we really require upper limb training for our COPD patients, because we all know that the diaphragm no longer works as a fulcrum because it's already become very flat. Anything, even combing their hair makes them very, very breathless. So, simple activities like raising their hands up and down and at that time doing personal breathing. So these things are extremely important. And we basically say interval training. So exercise your upper limb, then exercise your chest, then exercise your limbs, and then come to upper limb. This will also prevent them from getting more breathless. So this is important, and we recommend endurance training. And actually, we say that if the patient desaturates, make them exercise with oxygen. And when you make them exercise, let them reach up to 60 to 80% of the target endurance. And the Bog scale can be 4 to 6. But just make them exercise, and I think it makes a dramatical difference to life. And we as pulmonologists have to start utilizing this.
Yeah, because it's often neglected basically, and then we don't advise them. But it's very important part of management of COPD, which we often actually forget sometimes.
We all know that in PFT, in COPDs, despite treatment, the PFT does not improve. But with the limited function, with the same PFT, they can function better. So we're improving quality of life. And I would say that you asked me when, how. So except during an acute exacerbation, you should be doing physiotherapy every time, whether it's mild, moderate, severe, or frequently exacerbating. We must always make them do pulmonary rehab.
Yeah, and also often some monitoring whether they are doing it and then how much improvement it has made to their management. I would again come back to Dr. Chawla, who's been just waiting for long, in fact, and I would first shoot a question about vaccination, which has been also asked by one of our audience, that what are the vaccination now? Because initially we had only 2 vaccines, but now we have got 4 or 5 vaccines which have been advocated in COPD. If you can elaborate on that, Dr. Chawla. You're on mute, Dr. Chawla.
Thank you. Prevention is better than cure. It's an age-long saying. But recently, I must say, not recently, it is for the last 1 year now, the 5 vaccines have been advocated for the patients of COPD, and they help at a different system. Like, it's very, very important, maybe the time is short. COVID-19 vaccines, SARS-CoV-2 vaccines have been shown to be highly effective in patients of COPD to avoid the LRTI. Then you have influenza, which you advocate every year. This year, the strains have not changed, but to be taken every year again helps you to save from LRTI. Then you have pneumococcal vaccine, which helps you to avoid community-acquired pneumonia. What is there is you either 20-valent or 15-valent conjugate vaccine you use, followed by your 23-valent PPSV to be taken, and that your conjugate vaccines have to be taken once in a lifetime. When pneumococcal vaccine, you take it every 5 years, and it is what is advocated. The CDC has now recommended the pertussis, tetanus, and diphtheria. They say DTaP vaccine should be used in patients of COPD. And the latest addition is the zoster for shingles. To avoid the shingles, the zoster vaccine has been advocated. So these are the 5 vaccines which are advocated for COPD patients. But I still find the awareness, our physician friends of internal medicine, our GP population has to be made aware when the pulmonologist is advocating 5 vaccines to the patient, and when patient goes back to their parent doctors, since they are not aware of, and the clash of the opinion happens. So again, the vaccination in COPD has to be given a mass education. That is what is my take on this. Thank you.
Yeah, but I was just wondering whether we have got availability of this Tdap vaccination in India, because
all are available, sir. All are available. That is coming. This shingles is coming as Boostrix by GSK. It's coming. It's all available.
Okay,
all are
right.
available.
So yeah, so now there are 5 vaccination to then also remember that you get to your own COPD patients. Now for Dr. Chawla would be so center stage, because I'll be asking his favorite question, in fact, that he's also practicing in the field, and also to Dr. Nitin Abhyankar, that what is the role of interventional pulmonology in cases of COPD. So when do you refer patients, for interventional pulmonology, and then also what are the techniques that will help these patients, and then how do you choose these patients?
Should I answer?
Yes.
Okay.
First year.
See, if you talk of the bronchoscopic interventions, I must say again, these 2023 guidelines are biased.
Okay.
Since they talk about nitrogen cryotherapy, they talk about rheoplasty, they talk about target lung denervation, there are valves available, there are coils are available, thermal vapor ablation is available, and then what the CTVS surgeons like lung transplant and lung volume reduction surgeries and all that. In India, you don't have anything except thermal vapor ablation. That too still to pass the director drug controller authorities permission, and all permissions have to be taken, and they have made it available. Now, simple things like cryospray, lung denervation, they are very small catheters which are being developed in Europe. And now when we were in the World Congress in Marseille, France, they were displayed. They knew it. They are coming in the guidelines, and the guidelines are going to recommend them to be used for chronic bronchitis. What is this cryo spray? Basically, that you are using now the cryotherapy, and cryo is walking in an international pulmonology by doing debulking, doing the recanalization, taking cryo biopsies. Spray is the same needle, same catheter is hollow in front. So the nitrogen which you are using it, you just spray it in the airway. It will destroy 0.5 mm to 1 mm of the surface, which destroys basically the goblet cells, which are hypersecretory cells, and then the surface gets regenerated very fast, with this concept that mucus production will reduce and patient is relieved of the symptoms. Same is with the rheoplasty. Again, they have a catheter. You pass through your bronchoscope. You need a simple video bronchoscope or a normal PE2 bronchoscope to pass these catheters. But I'm sure you need a therapeutic bronchoscope to pass this and give a burp of the heat energy to destroy again the goblet cells. And the target denervation is working on the concept of destroying the parasympathetic nerves, again with the catheter which is water cooled, and we have a beautiful presentation. I presented these things in NAPCON Ahmedabad, correct, Ahmedabad, where I was given an oration. You can see the concept is very now 3-4 years old, but it has to walk into the guidelines. Till it walks, it will not be acceptable. So this is again a balloon which you are going to denervate the parasympathetic nerves. It reduces the production of acetylcholine, again reduces the production of this. Coils, valves are available since long, but to our country, they are still not available. You have to choose the patient, phenotype the patient, whether it is an heterogeneous emphysema. You are able to isolate that lung segment which is not taking part in ventilation, place the coil, it will remove that portion and fold it to itself. And like a lung volume reduction, the other lung will get compensated and will hyperinflate. And one-way valves are there, which we are using for air leaks. We are using for frequently. This is the indication for these one-way valve, and they are used now for lung volume reduction surgeries. The problems are pneumonias, pneumothorax, hemoptysis, COPD exacerbations, and these are the complications of the bronchoscopic interventions in nutshell. This is what I will put in about the IP, and it has a big role now as per the literature is saying. We still have to experience, since none of the things is available to us except steam vapor ablation, where again a bout of steam is passed after blocking the bronchus with the balloon, in again phenotyping the COPD. That area of segment is destroyed with the steam, and you let it settle for some time so that the compensatory part, the working part of the lung will take over. and patients' capacities will increase. We hope things are available to all of us and we are able to give the answer, because if the thoracic surgeon is doing lung volume reduction, there is morbidity, there is mortality involved. But at least in bronchoscopic interventions in COPD, that part is taken care of if you are doing the procedures in a nicer way and you take care of the infections. Thank you.
Yeah, very well summarized. And I would come to Dr. Nitin to just tell about how many of these techniques are available. As you said, there are just very few techniques. And how many of your patients have gone for lung transplantation because of COPD?
I think the answer to the second question, COPD, not yet one.
Yeah.
3 of them are transplanted and successfully, but COPD not yet.
None of them COPD, yeah.
There seems to be a little bit of a problem there, because of the overall quality of life already going down to a certain level. They are very often cachectic and all that. So I think not very many people with a COPD are opting out for, say, the ILD is like, more predictable for particularly UIP, IPF is much more predictable in the terms of needing transplant in the next 2 years, and patient can prepare for it. COPD is a different ball game because somebody can be alive on an NIV, and I think you will probably come back to that eventually on the supportive care kind of thing. But I think IP has a limited but an important role. As of now in India, it is hardly anything. Very frankly, I agree with Dr. Rakesh sir that, vapor is just one modality which is available and it is not yet fully practiced. One thing which I think the juniors must remember is that if you cannot apply these techniques for homogeneous emphysema, it has to be heterogeneous, preferably upper lobe emphysema. If I have that kind of a thing, then all the coils, everything that you're doing, valves, everything makes sense. Vapor ablation also, you can't just be doing everything everywhere. It is not realistic. If it is a heterogeneous disease with an upper lobe predominance for emphysema, everything, including LVRS, makes sense. So I think that is the simple take home for juniors in this whole thing. Yeah,
true.
And I think, Nitin, you have an honest submission. COPD patients does not accept lung transplant so easily. As you said, none. I'm sure it is none.
Yeah. It's very low, in fact.
Yeah. So if suppose that's not an option, and also many of the intervention procedures are not available, and of course they're also costly. I would ask Dr. Satish. Yeah.
Rajesh, they are not costly. Simple thing is things are not available to the biggest democracy of the world. I still do not know. We talk to Olympus people. This is the whole thing behind is the Felix Hart. He has done all these inventions for this with the Pallav Shah from UK. But why, I asked Felix, why you are not letting these things available into our country? Companies, problems, I do not know. But very simple catheters. Simple catheters, what you do a cryo, you do the TBNA, you do TBLB. Similarly, these catheters are to work with special machines. Press the button, heat is generated, and things are done. Similarly, steam vapor, you press, calibrated amount of steam will go, job is done. Why I still not able to understand? Very simple.
But I think many of these techniques are still under research. In fact, that has been said in gold.
Except the target nerve denervation, rest all they have shown very good results for the patients.
So I was just going to ask Dr. Satish that if it's not available in our country, that what you do with these patients who have got severe COPD, you have tried everything, and now basically how to also reduce what you call mortality in these patients in this patient in which you have exhausted all this pharmacotherapy and also rehabilitation, still they are quite symptomatic.
Okay, I think it's very important question, Rajesh, to address, because what do we do for patients when you have exhausted everything? I think there are the table on the recent guideline. The table shows that how to reduce mortality in these patients, and there's only one pharmacotherapy in this mention, which is the triple combination, which we discussed already, where to use and what is the contraindication. And there are RCTs and which are available, definitely. The others are a non-pharmacological treatment or mode of therapy. Number one is smoking cessation. Repeated RCTs have shown that it makes a tremendous impact on reducing the mortality on patients. And pulmonary rehabilitation. Again, RCTs are available. And also oxygen, long-term oxygen also helps in these patients. This also definitely makes a difference. And I think also there's a mention about the role of surgery, which we just discussed about LVRS. These are some of the modes of treatment which makes a difference on the mortality for these patients. And when I say oxygen therapy, also I think we should include NIV for selected patients. All these 5 modalities definitely are RCTs are available. These will reduce the mortality in patients. So just to summarize, there is only one pharmacological therapy which reduces mortality, and the rest are all which are non-pharmacological therapies.
True. So I think we have actually covered entire infant gamut of COPD management, right from its definition, its classification, and also diagnosis, treatment, rehabilitation, smoking cessation, intermittent pulmonology, and the COPD. And we also answered many of actually questions of audience which I was seeing on the chat. I think we have just pretty covered everything. There is one question that has not been covered, and this is about air travel and COPD. So I mean, what you do for that? So basically, we got hypoxia simulation test actually that we do in these patients. And if somebody of you can just come and tell that how to do air travel fitness tests for these COPD patients.
Okay, so I think, Rajesh, I think you'll be the best. You'll be the best person to say because you already have it with you. I ask you to answer this question.
Yeah, so it was started basically when. Yeah, so actually we just started doing this when we had this post-COVID pandemic, and we saw airlines refusing patients who were actually wheelchair bound, and they said they were actually refused this thing when they were having 1 or 2 liters of oxygen. So of course we do what we call hypoxia simulation test, in which we actually give and we actually simulate the altitude of air that the plane goes. In fact, so of course that would be about 30,000 feet above sea level, and we actually give them a bit of more, I think, nitrogen, and hence they would as they would respire only about 15% of oxygen that will simulate that condition. And then we do pre and post ABG and see if there's some difference in it. So that is how we do it. It is called as hypoxia simulation test, which is in the test book, and you need a cylinder of nitrogen, and I think pretty much it's done like that. So that is the question that had come, which we had not answered.
Can I add something?
Yeah,
because I think the more important issue is not the hypoxia simulation test. Most of them will one way or the other get through it, but mask fitness test is more important for these patients, because they may pick up an infection from the other patient, because you are sitting in such a close environment and nobody is wearing a mask today anymore on the flight. So I think that is a more dangerous thing which is going to happen to these patients, and they'll pick up an infection, and that will be much more dangerous than the little bit of hypoxia which they can generally tolerate, because most of the COPD patients are used to a little bit of hypoxia on exertion, surely.
Rajesh, also, yeah, Amita.
Yeah, I just want to give a clinical point, because not all of us are luxurious enough like Dr. Swarnakar to be able to do this test. But usually if the patient saturation is 95% or more on room air, then these people very, very comfortably tolerate air travel. So that would be one thing.
Yeah, so it's only for those patients who have got oxygen and they are wheel bound and then wheelchair bound with some oxygen cylinder. Those are the patients in which actually airline staff are wary of taking them inside for, we had some 2 or 3 episodes in which actually plane had to do emergency landing because of these things. So I think that is what they look for. So I think that
now,
patients
they become a little more kinder when you say
that
they want oxygen on air. They are actually very, very happy to provide it. And now all patients have their own pulse oximeters because of COVID. So it has become slightly easier air travel.
Yeah. So Rajesh wanted to inform for this benefit of audience, there is a very good British Thoracic Society guideline supplement. There is a supplement available a few years back, covers everything about air travel and lung diseases, including pneumothorax, infections, tuberculosis, and of course, COPD and asthma.
Yeah, and I've got a question from our friend Dr. Chatterjee, who's asking about the reversibility testing in basically oscillometry, and how do you really judge that these patients are early COPD? So he's saying if those parameters is of R5 or R5 minus 20. So I think Dr. Tridib, actually most sensitive for COPD is AX, in fact, rather than your R5 minus 20 or R5, because even if it's normal, it comes with resistance. So basically what we actually look at is AX, and for early COPD, we have got various articles which are there, and also Dr. Sadhvi has also published. So, and actually these, but unfortunately, they have actually used actually different instruments for this cutoff. So there is no what you call standardization of instruments in which the cutoff values are seen. But as far as I know from my, I think, experience, or my that I was reading of this actually research articles, is that if AX is more than 8 or so, then of course that will be early COPD, and it's much more of AX rather than R5 or R5 minus 20. And there is an article on the New England Journal of Medicine on early COPD diagnosis, in which it is heavily advocating, in fact, oscillometry to be used for these patients, but still it has to come in gold guidelines.
And R5 coming down by 20 to 40%. So there is a range given, even in by the manufacturers, they are not giving you a specific value, because I think the data has still to emerge. But 20 to 40% is a big range that is being given.
It's a big range. Yeah. So I think, thank you, my panelists, my dear panelists.
Rajesh, before you close, my take is ICS, NCCP, CCI should put in an energy to put pranayam, yoga into the guidelines. What they are making, again, I am saying, these GINA guidelines 2023 or coming in early 2000, mid of 2023, these societies to pitch in the original of India, the yogas, the pranayams into the gold 23, rather than we keep on discussing our things. See, we are owner of a rich culture and heritage. These societies have to put in forward that these should be added, and we should show them the benefits of yoga and pranayam in the gold guidelines. This is my take of today's what we have discussed.
Yeah, I do. So I do agree that at least Indian guidelines of COPD should at least include, I think, something mentioned about these about the yoga therapy and all this. That I really agree, and I hope it is there, because we just had an updated COPD guidelines meeting, which we just finished about 2 to 3 weeks back, and so I hope that is included. So I think we have come to the end of this fabulous webinar, and of course, thank you, my dear panelists. You had come, and you have also benefited audience by your experience, and you have elaborated on each and every point of COPD management. And of course, thank you, CCI, for also giving me opportunity for being moderator. And I would hand over it to the organizer, or I think Dr. Krishna would come and will appear.
He had said he's going to say goodbye.
Yeah. So just to announce, Nitin and Rajesh, just to announce, there were 862 logins at 9 o'clock.
Oh,
That's so great.
Well done, so Rajesh, and everyone.
No, actually, thanks to you all, to all of you, to make it interesting and a very exhaustive, in fact, discussion covering, I think, all aspects of COPD that I could really remember.
I think it was a wonderful discussion. I think I really enjoyed listening to all the expert comments, and fantastic moderation by Rajesh. Awesome.
Thank you all. So
I think Dr. Krishna is not coming. He just put up that he introduced at the end.
Okay. So I think you should just have
Rajesh.
I think, yeah, of course. We should just actually just thank you, and I think we'll meet in another Thursday and another edition of the CCI webinar. Thank you all, and also take a very good care of it. Thank you all. See you. Bye.